the place for the independent creator, vlogger, podcaster, filmmaker, musician, writer, speaker to learn the tools and tricks that other creators have used to build their own successful platforms. This is LimeLight DIY with your host, Ryan McKay. You don't need unlimited resources, just a little knowledge, some creativity, and, oh yeah, a whole lot of grit. Now here's your host, Ryan McKay.
This is LimeLight DIY. I am your host. I am Ryan. I will be your podcaster for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a personal friend of mine on the podcast today, and I'm a little excited about this. I learned a lot from this guy, and I know that you're going to learn a lot too. This LimeLight DIY is all about, as some of you know, the independent creator and what it takes for them to reach up to the next level on their own. We're talking about bootstrapping it here, and the guest that we have today is the master of bootstrapping. This man is an author. This man is a podcaster. This man is a shock jock. This man is a radio broadcaster. This man is an entrepreneur, and probably about 15 other things that don't come to mind right now because they're all kind of swirling around. This is Chris Akin. Chris Akin and I have known each other for the last 20 years now. This is a man who actually gave me my start. Before we get into it, I want to remind you all, go over to limelightdiy.com, sign up for the monthly digest. You're going to get actionable tips. You're going to get show notes, exclusive content, new tools, and new services that I'm using each and every month. Right now, though, let's get into Chris Akin. Chris Akin, thanks for joining us today, sir.
Dude, I'm honored to be on, and wow, what an introduction. I don't even realize my own resume until I hear somebody else say it.
Now, Chris, I kind of went through the beginning of it, but why don't you take a little further? Because I know I missed a whole bunch of things that you're into.
Sure. Well, I do a lot of things, and a lot of people think that I'm absolutely insane for the amount of stuff that I do. But I'll start with the biggest stuff, and then I'll move to the passion stuff. I own two businesses. I own an IT business doing websites and app design, development, blah, 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 blah. Anything with a computer, doing that. That's called Akin IT Services. I've had that for 13 years, I guess, since 2006. And then I have one of the largest vintage video game and pinball machine museums in the country. It's called Pinball PA. It's located just west of Pittsburgh, and we have 430 some odd machines on the floor that are actively available to play. And I think we're the fourth largest in the country, which is a pretty cool thing. And and we do the standard thing. There's a museum element to it where you can learn about pinball and arcades and that type of stuff, as well as you can come in and play our interactive exhibits, so you can come in and play, your Space Invaders and your Defender and your Addams Family pinball or whatever you want. And that's a fun venture there. So those are my two main businesses. As far as my passion stuff, I have the Classic Metal Show, which is a shock jock type of a radio show that I've been doing. I've been on it for about 15 years. The show itself is 23 years old. I do it with my partner, Neely, who it's interesting because we use technology all over the place. We do the show. I'm here in Ohio. He's in Chicago, but we do it live without any kind of cutovers or cut-ins or anything. And it sounds like we're in the same room. So we do that once a week on Saturdays at 9 p.m. Don't let your kids listen, please. And what else do? I write books. I just finished publishing my my fifth book, which is called Cause and Effect Turbo, but I've written 3 music books about various bands, and I've written 2 books that are personal in nature, one about divorce and one about being in an accident where I got burned up pretty good, and I took a 7-ton molten shower in a steel mill. Came back from that. So I think that's all the things that I'm doing these days. But I stay very busy. Watch a lot of TV too. You'd be surprised how well versed I am in TV, considering how busy it sounds that I am.
Well, Chris and I met about 20 years ago when Chris was doing a radio show for WMMS in Cleveland, right, which is a channel that I worked for about 4 or 5 years after that fact. Chris at the time was not only co-hosting the metal show, Chris was also running a newspaper called Music's Bottom Line, which I believe you built from the ground up, and actually ended up when it was time to move on, you actually ended up selling that, and then immediately jumped into other new projects. This is one of my favorite stories and pieces of advice, tips, something that I actually built my life after. When you told me how you got onto the metal show on WMMS, which I will point out, this is a legendary radio station.
Sure.
I won't get into the current station and the current situation with Clear Channel, but I mean, this is the station that had been around for 50 years and has been on countless movies, TV shows, all that. And you ended up going in there and getting yourself on the air. And can you kind of share what you did to get that spot?
Yeah, it was so outrageous that I can't believe it happened. It was one of those things that I was working for a magazine here in Cleveland called Scene, which is like the local weekly throw it at the doorstep of the bar magazine, and everybody picks it up, and you find out who's coming to town, and maybe there's an interview here or there or whatever. And I was working for them, and I did an interview with a local band called Spawn that was here. Got to be friends with those guys, and they had heard the metal show on the WMMS, and they asked me, they said, "Hey, can you help us get on there?" Because I was like the only guy, quote unquote, in the business that they knew. And I was barely in the business. I was a beat writer for a free paper. So, I don't know how in the business I was, but I was like, sure, I can find out. And I made a couple of calls. And the guy that was the host was a guy named Matt, and Matt, but Matt is he went by the moniker the Warlock on the show, and he asked me to come in. I explained to him what I was trying to do, and he was like, "Well, yeah, we can have your friends in, but I'm a fan of Music's Bottom Line. Why don't you come in and promote that?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." And for me, I grew up wanting to be on the radio. That's all I ever wanted to do. I literally went to the military to be a radio guy. When I'm 5 years old, I'm under my dad's pool table listening to baseball games and sitting with a little microphone, recording myself calling the baseball game as I just heard the call. There's a strike to Joe Charbonneau or whatever. I was that guy. And so to get this opportunity on the biggest station in Cleveland that legendary for me, top 25 of all time, I couldn't have been more happy just to get on once. So I get on the show the one time, and Matt and I had a really good rapport. We did a nice interview. And at some point he gets Dave Mustaine on. It was just planned that way. And from Megadeth, of course. And so Matt's doing his interview, and I'm just being quiet on the side. It's not my place to get involved or anything. Well, Matt throws it to me. It's like, "Hey, do you have a question for Dave Mustaine?" And I asked Dave a question he didn't like. And he blew up at me, and just was like, "Well, you so-and-so and this and that." And I went right back at him. I was not intimidated even a little bit. And so it turned into this on-air argument. And what ended up happening was they got a lot of response. Who's this guy? And, this guy sucks, or this guy's great, or whatever. There was some of both. But, at the end of it, Matt called me up and was like, "Hey, do you want to come back on and do the show again?" And I was like, "Sure." And it's funny because Matt had actually, as he does, and you've done his show as well.
Yep.
The last thing he says every time is, "Hey, if anytime you want to come back, the door's open." Well, I took that to heart, and I just, between that and him saying that people were interested in what I was doing, I started showing up. And, I ended up being on the show for 12 years. It just sort of grew. MMS was happy with that there was attention drawn to their, a specialty show. And it ended up growing into, you were here. The metal show was huge. It was in Cleveland. It was the weekend equivalent of Howard Stern. It had a huge audience, probably 40, 50,000 people a week listening to it. I did what I do. I was, shock jock guy, and I was the guy that would look an interviewee in the face and tell them that their music blew and just, didn't care. And people loved that. And, people loved the jockery of it. And what was interesting about that was when we were at MMS, I never took a paycheck. I didn't even, Matt tried to work that out and it just wasn't working out, but I didn't even want that because, one, I was from, like I was talking about earlier, the burn accident. I really couldn't get a job anyway because I was on workers' comp and this was just something I was doing for fun. And so the unique thing was I was not hired by MMS, but they let me promote what was my timekeeper at the time, something I was doing just for the fun, which was Music's Bottom Line. So instead of taking money, I just worked it out that, hey, I could promote Music's Bottom Line every week, twice a show. And it helped me grow Music's Bottom Line into, Music's Bottom Line competed directly with Scene Magazine. And it was a truly free paper. There was no money behind it. There was no money being made, really. It just had good distribution. And I put together a really good crew of people to write it with me. And it was kind of the free alternative to the business of music that was going on in Cleveland at the time. So it really kind of, like I was saying to you before we started, everything builds on everything else.
Yes.
And that has been that's really been a hallmark of my career, for the last 20 whatever years. Every little thing that doesn't seem like it matters, at the time has turned into something that's been bigger and bigger and bigger to where now, I don't say that I'm like super successful. I'm not a millionaire or anything like that, but I've been able to do some amazing things sitting on my couch. I haven't worked a job in, I've been technically worked a job where I go and sit in somebody's cubicle. I haven't done that since 2004. I've just been here, doing my thing and it's all worked out and it's a lot of work, but if you're not afraid of the work, there's money to be made. So that's kind of how the metal show happened in a nutshell.
And the interesting thing about this is, as you said, it all builds off of each other. Excuse me. Through Music's Bottom Line, you gave me a writing position in, I want to say 2000, 2001. And I was going to school at the time for broadcasting. I was interning with one of the other big local stations, WTAM, at the time. I was in the newsroom, and not long after, when I graduated, I got offered a job in the sales department with WMMS, the same station that you and Matt were with.
Sure.
You and Matt had ended up leaving right before I came on to go across the street to 92.3, I believe it was. Right. And they were looking, when I came on board, they were looking for something to sort of pick up from the metal show, because when the metal show stopped, there was this big vacuum left over.
Sure.
Especially after the Browns games, which amazingly people do pay attention to the Browns. Sure. Because we're gluttons for punishment in Cleveland. The games would be over and everyone would be miserable because we lost like every time. And they would tune off the station. The station would throw on Cold Hard Bitch or something from Buckcherry over and over again. So they actually brought in a show called Native Noise, which was a local rock-based show. Yeah. And taking a page out of your book, I was not originally on that. Co-host Jesse was on that, and then they brought in Cheryl to co-host, and it had its audience. And then one day Cheryl was gone, and they came to me and said, you're in this scene. Yeah. Would you like to come on and do an episode? So I came on and did the same thing, and I ended up playing the same role that you did, which was the guy that wasn't necessarily nice to the bands, the one who would call them on their pirate shirts and things like that. And it worked. People loved it. It wasn't just people kissing up to bands. Right. And they did the same thing. They said, hey, this worked out pretty well. Let us know next time you want to do this. And taking a page out of your book and seeing how you done it, I just started showing up on Sundays.
Sure.
And nobody ever actually offered me the job. It just sort of organically happened. Right. And that's kind of one of the lessons that I wanted to touch on here today is generally, and I'd like to hear your thoughts more on this, most of the bigger opportunities are not going to be from you going to somebody and saying, I'd like the opportunity, and they say yes. Most of the big opportunities are sort of more organically grown, and you kind of have to take the lead on it.
Oh, I 100% agree. No matter, at least in my life, anything that I've been able to succeed at has been something that I've gone and taken. It's never, I worked in the corporate world like everybody else for, 12 years or whatever that I was doing it. And I couldn't get ahead to save my life. I'd be the best at what I was doing, and it didn't matter. I was doing IT work. I was working on a help desk. Hi, you need your password reset, or you need here, follow these steps, or, that type of work. And I was the best at it. I would take the most calls. I would have the highest clearance rate. I was, for 2 different companies, I did it this way, and I was the best at it. And all it got me was, it got to the point where it was, okay, you've done everything perfect. You've done everything right. Here's your 3% raise. It just goes nowhere. And the last year that I was doing it, I was working for an insurance company here in town in Independence, which is like an offshoot of Cleveland.
Yeah.
And they put me up for nationwide for analyst of the year, which, in the IT field, that was a big deal. And I came up runner-up as IT analyst of the year, a second place in the country. 5,000 people put up for it. I'm number 2, which I will argue all day long. I beat the person, but she had a better sob story than I did. Wait
a minute. She had a better sob story than you. You were hit by a shower of molten metal.
Yeah, but I didn't use it. You know me well enough to know I'm not going to be in there going, oh, poor me. Yeah. I'm so hurt. And she had her sob story with tears and everything. And I just was like, whatever, but whatever. She won. I finished second. I went from that to the next week having my job performance, maxed out job performance, get the big 4% raise, the only guy in the IT department getting a 4%, not a 3%. And then being told that I wasn't corporate enough to move any further, and that if I wanted to get into mid-management, then I should probably start looking at other opportunities. And I was like, you know what? F this, man. I'm not, and within 2 weeks I found another job, and I left. And, because, and at the time I was making like $48,000 a year, and I'm being told that's it. You're stuck, 48 grand. And not that 48 grand is a bad number. And certainly wasn't a bad number 15 years ago. And I would imagine there's a lot of people watching or listening today that would love 48 grand, but I personally felt like I had more value than that. And, I'm a self-taught everything. I taught myself how to do web design. I taught myself how to build apps. I taught myself how to, the job that I left for was to go and build trouble ticketing systems. And I self-taught myself that on the side as this analyst, just because I was trying to do more to get ahead. I wasn't comfortable sitting with a headset on, taking phone calls day after day with people that couldn't figure out why their mouse stopped working. I wanted to do more. So anytime anybody offered any opportunity, hey, there's this system, do you want to intern on it? Yep, I absolutely do. And I taught myself, I'm doing A+ certification type work by day, and I'm teaching myself Oracle at night. But that's what it took. And when I left that insurance company, I went to another company and took almost a 50% raise. I went from $48,000 a year to $85,000 a year immediately. One day, worked Friday for $40,000, worked Monday for $80,000.
Well, they say, and it's true, you don't make your money by performing the job. You make your money when taking the job, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say, I have a big mouth. I was terrible at corporate. I got fired, from every place except for the one that I quit. I never wanted, I was always smart enough then, even as a younger kid, to know that I did not want to be anywhere. I wasn't looking for my 40-year anchor. I knew damn well that you work 3 years, they bring you in high, but then they even you out. And it's just math. By the end of the third year, you're making scale. Anything after the third year, you're below scale. So, and I know you have friends and you've done it yourself that have worked places for longer. And what do they always complain about? They're bitching constantly that they brought in somebody brand new and they're making more than me. And I've been here 11 years. And it's because everybody looks at stability as having somewhere to go. And really, that's just fear of change, not stability. There's no stability in the corporate world, none. So, for me personally, I have more stability hoping that I get paid today. Because at least here, doing what I do right now, the only thing that stops me is me. If I want, I've had weeks in the last year. I had 1 week. I had my highest single grossing week in the history of anything that I've done. I made $30,000 in 1 week, and that's a nice chunk of money, And I mean, that was like hard cash. That wasn't stuff that I had to pay then 25 of it out to billing or anything. That was money that I made and put in my hand. And there's a lot of people that they got to work 11 months to do that or 12 months to do that. And I pulled it in 5 days from just hustling and working. I know for a fact that if I want to do that again, all I have to do is show up and work hard. I know if I'm in the corporate world, there's zero chance that happens.
And that's really sort of the lesson behind what most people who are listening to this podcast are trying to learn anyways is taking control a little bit, because everyone goes, well, if you're in a band, you need to get signed. If you're an author, you need to get picked up by a publishing house. Yeah. If you're a podcaster, then you need to get picked up by one of the big radio conglomerates. And that isn't always the direction you need to go, I would say.
It depends on what you're looking for, I guess. I mean, if you're looking for, like for us, with any of these projects, my books, the radio show, the podcast that comes with the radio show, we've been offered to, like, we had an offer for the radio show back before the merger with XM Radio. We had an offer to go do it. And we thought about it. I mean, it was it's a great offer, but in the end, we didn't really want to do it because they would end up, they had all these stipulations that we weren't willing to give regardless of money. Money didn't even matter. It was, they wanted ownership of the show and they wanted to, and I wasn't willing to give something that I built and then have them fire me and replace me with, Knucklehead and Joe from whatever radio station in Rochester, and have them doing what I do, or saying that they were doing what I do. I built this. I built the audience. So I wanted the independence of it. The same with the books, as I was telling you before we started, I had a book deal with a very major publisher for my first book. And I really thought about it. I mean, I took money from them. I took in advance and I had to give it back. And the reason I had to give it back was because I'm stubborn and probably stupid, because it was $11,000. It wasn't like $20. It was a big check. And for me to write a check back for $11,000 hurt me. But at the same time, I have an unbelievable sense of self and confidence like nobody's business. And I was just like, you know what? This is my book. It has my name on it, and it's going to be my way. They didn't like some of the chapters in the book's called Little Victories, and it's a divorce.
It's available on Amazon too, right?
It's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the places that you get books. But they wanted to change everything. They didn't like the cover. They said it was too dark, and they couldn't sell it as self-help, and they didn't like some of the stories that I told because they were mean. And meanwhile, this book was written in real time going through a divorce.
Yes.
So what it features is the real-time emotion of going through a divorce. And anybody that's been through a bad breakup or a divorce knows that's not happy time. That's not time that you're selling rainbows and chocolate chips. It's ugly time, and there's a lot of ugly emotion in that book, and there was a lot of ugly self-realization in that book, and I wasn't willing to change it for money. Money would, if they wanted that, they could hire me and I'll write them a fantasy novel about how divorce, leads you in riding on a unicorn across a rainbow. If that's what they really wanted, then fine. But I offered them, they picked up on me and then wanted to change everything about it. And that wasn't going to work. There's a thing with anything that I do. And, if you want a lesson on how to be a good entrepreneur, it's never focus on the money. Anytime you focus on the money, you're destined to fail at accomplishing what you want to achieve. The two things do not ride concurrent with each other. If you accomplish what you want to achieve and it was a good idea, the money will be there. But if you focus on making money and you consider that achievement, you'll always fail because you're always compromising your integrity to keep the money. And
it's playing the short game.
Yeah. And that's, I guess for some people that works. If I was a stockbroker, I'd probably have a different analysis of it.
I would hope you did.
But I'm not. I'm a pinball sharing IT guy that writes books and says the F word on the radio sometimes.
And I will say, when all of that happened with your divorce, you and I were working on a work project at the time. So I did get a little bit of a front row seat throughout that entire process. And I remember at the time, you had about a week there where, we didn't talk a whole lot. And when you came back, you had already started writing this book in real time. And we were all curious at the time, how raw is this going to be? And the answer was, and I've read the book since then, it's very raw, but it's also very real.
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things that I like to just tell the truth, and I have ugly truth like everybody else does. Believe me, there's a million things I wish I wouldn't have shared on the Classic Metal Show or in the books or whatever, embarrassing things. But I don't feel like I have to pretend to be something I'm not. I mean, I've got the hair down, it's pulled back, but I've got hair down to the middle of my back. I'm a hippie. I'm a foul mouth guy at times. I'm very, very, I've got an ego bigger than the two rooms that you and I are sitting in. But that being said, I use all that stuff to my advantage to, I do honest work. And people can like me, and you know this from the radio days. There's a lot of people that like me. There's 15 times more that don't, and I don't worry about it. I just do what I do, and I've been very fortunate and very, successful to do everything my own way without ever having to compromise. And I never have. I've never compromised. As long as you've known me, have you ever seen me back down from anything?
I'm looking back over the 20-year history, and there have been some very memorable moments in there. Compromise on your part was not one of them. Let me take a quick break just to say real quickly here. The book currently on Amazon, currently on Barnes and Nobles. If you want to check out the classic metal show that Chris mentioned, I believe that is up on. You can get that on most of the podcasting platforms, correct?
It's everywhere. It's Stitcher and iHeart and TuneIn and iTunes and Spreaker and blah blah blah. It's everywhere. That's such an amazing thing, because it really is just it's just me and Neely just, BSing. It's not, it's a 6-hour show that we do live once a week, and it's 5 hours of it is actual talk. There's very little music played on this thing anymore. And it's us talking about anything. It could be politics or music or sex or, whatever. And it has absolutely exploded. But again, it goes back to what we were saying before. We're honest, and it's the kind of thing. I mean, yeah, sometimes we say stuff that people are like, "Ooh, how dare you? How dare you say that?" or whatever. But it has been unbelievably successful with no support at all, no sponsorship, and we kind of don't want it. We don't want to turn it into business. but with no sponsorship at all, we've done 5 million downloads in a few years with the podcast, the actual audio files, and we just passed 2 million views on YouTube.
And this is something I kind of want to go into a little bit. And first of all, let me take a second to say, if you are enjoying this podcast right now, please go on to iTunes or whatever platform you have found this podcast on, and give an honest review. Thumbs up, thumbs down, doesn't matter. I'm looking for feedback. I'm looking to hear that you've actually listened to the podcast. So thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever your critique is, definitely want to hear it.
Sure.
But when we talk about, excuse me, your podcast. Let's go into breaking this down a little bit. You have, since I've known you, been one of those people who does not get famed by celebrities, and that's something that's very difficult for people to get past. And I'm not just talking. You obviously talk to a lot of quote unquote rock stars, out there. You've talked to just about everybody that has been on stage. But for people who are listening, for people who are looking to reach out to somebody that's big in their field. It could be a celebrity, could be a pseudo celebrity. What is the first step to you? If you're teaching somebody else, what is the first step to getting comfortable when you're reaching out to somebody who's supposedly out of your reach?
Well, I mean, you have to learn how to deal with their handlers. That's kind of universal, with any field. Is you're never going to call, forget rock stars, but even with rock stars, you're never going to call Ozzy and say, hey, man, why don't you come and do my podcast? Instead, you're going to go to a publicist that's going to go to a manager that's going to ask the inner circle of Ozzy if Ozzy's available for 10 minutes. That's how that works. And it's the same with anything. I mean, I'll point to my pinball business as a better example, because that probably relates more to your audience. I have a wonderful relationship with the CEO of the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, which is the biggest paper in Pittsburgh. It's the, whatever your biggest paper is there in Florida, it's that, in Orlando or whatever. It's that. Was that the Orlando Sentinel or something?
Sentinel. I think it's the only paper too. Okay.
So it would be the equivalent of that. And I have made this connection by, just asking, really. I reached out, her name's Jen, and I reached out to Jen and I said, hey, can you, we're doing something new. Can you help us? And it got farmed, as you would imagine. It got farmed out, and I didn't get response immediately, but I kept at it. I was cordial, but not a pest. If you're a pest, you just get marked as spam and you're gone. Mm-hmm. But I stayed at it, and finally she came out and she took a look at the place and did a story. And from that, then we did other stories, and we've been featured now in the Pittsburgh, in the Trib, I think 7 times in 5 years, and we've ended up doing promotions with them and everything. I mean, there's a online gaming thing called Hearthstone. It's like a card game thing or whatever. And one of their side entities was involved in it. And because I had built this relationship, then they hired us to host a Hearthstone tournament that we co-hosted with this multi-million-dollar top 500 company. I mean, it just all comes together. As far as making the connection, it's very hard to do. And you can't everybody does the same thing. In the end, everybody that's marketing does the same thing. They're selling their widget, whether their widget is pens or whether their widget is a service or whatever their widget is. Everybody's doing the same thing. So everybody's pitch is basically the same pitch. The difference between you and everybody else, or at least between me and everybody else, is I've learned not to be a pest. I've learned to not take no. And, I kind of merge the two. As an example, something I'm working on with radio right now, I'm working on getting an interview with Anthony Cumia from the Opie and Anthony show.
Yes.
Famous DJ. And he's an influence of mine. And he just put out a book. So it's been this thing. Now, I don't know anybody in the camp, but I reached out. I found an email address, info at whatever online, and I reached out to it, and I ended up getting a name, and I started talking to the person whose name I got, and we've been slowly negotiating our way through it. And the first thing I did was I did an interview with his co-host on his current show, and that went well. And now I'm reaching out trying to get Anthony on the show. And the fact that I've been polite, but I've been, not a pest, has definitely played in my favor. When I reached out, the girl's name is Allie that handles Ant. And I reached out to her when the book was out and said, hey, can we do something? And she was like, yeah, I know that you did this interview with Dave, the other host. And I was like, okay, cool. But then, he got into the rush of interviews. So it didn't happen right away. But instead of just not saying no, I kept politely saying, hey, can I reach back in 2 weeks? Can I reach back in a month? Can we get this done? And being honest helps, because I said to her point blank, I said, if this isn't going to happen, that's okay, but just tell me. And she's like,
sorry, can you say it one more time? That the audio cut out for a second there. I want to make sure people catch that.
Yeah. When I was going back and forth with her, I just said to her, I said, is this going to happen? Because I don't want to keep wasting your time or my time. I want to do it. I want to promote what they're doing over there, but I don't want to be a pest either. So and she's been honest back with me saying, yeah, we can do it. He's been busy with this and he's had the flu and blah, blah, blah. So we are going to end up doing it, but it's been this slow build to get this thing done.
And I think you said something there that I kind of want to unpack a little bit, in that you pointed out that you said specifically, I don't want to waste your time.
Right.
I want to help promote your project. When I know we all look at it as, well, what can I really offer these people who are so much bigger than me? And to a degree that is true. There is more to get from them than vice versa. But it's always been my experience, at least, that when you go into it and try to offer, this is what I want to do for you,
right,
as well, that makes a difference. What are your thoughts on that?
That's the only approach I have. I would never be the one to say, I have a book, you should buy my book. That's not right. And that's not fair to your audience. Your audience is the reason that you do or do not make money.
Yes.
In any sort of business. If you're a plumber, it does you no good to say, I'm the best plumber in the area. What does you the most good is, what's going on with your pipes and how can I help you fix that?
Exactly.
I, as a salesperson, and I'm a self-taught salesperson, but it's what I do the best. Being perfectly honest, I hate doing web work and I hate doing coding and I don't love it, but it's my moneymaker, and it lets me sit on the couch and watch TV while I work, which is great. But what I do love to do is I do love to sell. And the reason I love to sell is because it's so easy and people make it hard. People will tell you that selling is this hard thing and it's all about confidence and it's all about presentation and it's all about this and that and whatever. It's not about any of that stuff. There's two elements that I've found that make me a good seller. And I mean, I am a 75, 80% closer. If I get on the phone, somebody's giving me a check. That's how it works. But I only do two things that I do every time. The first one is I ask one simple question. What is it that I can do for you? And then I shut up. And that's a big fail that most people have, is they don't shut up. They just instantly go and they're, well, if I came to you right now, Ryan, and you were looking for a new microphone.
Yeah.
And I said to you, what can I do? What do you need? You'll tell me, well, I need something that'll work with podcasting. The average salesperson will stop you right there and go, well, you know what? You really should look at the ASB 365 because it does this and that. And, and they miss it. They've already lost the sale. Yes. At best, they're going to get 10% of the people that they approach that way. I say, What do you want? What is it that I can do for you? And then I put my hands on the table and I shut up until they're done talking. Because rule of thumb, sales rule number one, if they're talking to you, they want to spend money. They're willing to spend money. The thing is, by you being a salesman, they're not going to spend money. You've bought a car. And when you buy a car, do you buy it from the guy that the minute you jump on the lot is walking up to you and say, hey, what can I get for you? Do you need something with a radio? Do you need a sunroof? Do you need something shiny? That guy, you can't wait to get away from that guy. And usually you get back in your car and drive away.
Agreed. Actually, we just went through that process a few weeks ago, and that is exactly what happened.
Yeah. And what did you end up doing? You buy a car in the place where you looked at it, you found what you wanted, you walked into the dealer, somebody came up to you and said, what can I do for you?
Yep, exactly. And this is, I look for the guy that's going to open up, here's the options, take as much time as you want, let me know what information you need.
Yeah.
And that's not just as a quote unquote salesperson, because I know there's going to be people who are listening going, I'm not in sales. Well, if you are in the business of trying to promote yourself, to promote anything, to even if you're not trying to promote, but you're just trying to get something done, you have to be the salesperson you're talking about.
Absolutely. But you can't be an overbearing jerk. Everybody hates that guy. Nobody likes that guy in their office. Nobody is wooed by a free lunch. Nobody is wooed by, a gift. Nobody's wooed by any of that stuff. Go in, say, what can I do for you? And just shut up. The person will talk until they've put everything that they want on the table. And once they put what they want on the table, you only have to say, well, I can definitely do this, and I can definitely do that, and I can definitely do this. Here's what that will cost. And then the only decision that they're really making is if they're going to hire you for the whole job or a piece of the job. They're never going to say no. Almost never.
And for those of you that are listening at home, and let's use the aspiring band guy as an example, because that's a group that both Chris and I have a lot of experience with. The band guy at home who is trying to get in front of a DJ, an A&R guy, or what have you, the press guy, and is trying to do the big push, the big sell as to, well, this is why you should put my band on the air. How would you say that this sales skill translates into that arena?
Well, it's the same basic principle. Bands can't cut their own throats quick enough by telling promoters or people to put them on the show how great they are and how they're going to do miracles. And that's what every band that you and I ever ran into does. Every single one of them. You know what? We bring 500 people a night, and they'll buy your bar dry, and they'll do this and that, and they're going to sell 100 shirts for every band on the place because they're so good. And then they get there with their 4 girlfriends, and that's it.
Yep.
And it's always a failure. But the ones, and I mean, in the old Cleveland scene that me and you were a part of, we all had cliques. And there was a definite set of band cliques that worked together. And when the reason that those bands always worked together was not necessarily because the music was great or because they were, this band fit well with that band or this band made more than this or anything.
Yeah.
It was because it was a hassle-free deal.
Entirely.
The bands that you played for, whether your band was great or whether your band was garbage.
Toxin sucked. There's a little inside joke. Don't look that up, people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they won't know how to spell it. So, but the reason that we use Toxin as an example, one of the main reasons that Toxin got as many gigs as you guys did, and you guys had a ton of gigs,
we did,
was because you who was the band leader, the business guy, you as the business guy were not difficult to deal with. And as a band, nobody ever had to worry about, your guys showing up drunk or high or embarrassing the show or, talking about that. talking a bunch of smack to the promoter or to the club owner or whatever. You guys were businesslike. You came in, you did your gig. It was good. It wasn't good. Didn't matter. It never embarrassed the show. So the next time that, I don't know, Gatlin or whoever the big band was that you guys were playing with was doing a show, you guys were always in that mix because you were a difficulty-free entity that brought people. You brought some people to the shows, and the people appreciated not only your band, but all the other bands. And it was an organic business entity. I mean, I at the time, none of us thought of it as a business entity, but it really was. It was, business piece 1, the biggest band, business piece 2, the middle band, business piece 3, the small band, business piece 4, the bar owner.
Yes.
And if you put all of those together and nobody caused any problems and just did their job, it was always a good experience. And there was always an opening to provide your service again.
And without going too deep into the inside information that we have on that stuff or bringing other names into it, there was a group of us. There was it was at any given moment 5 to 6 bands that we played with, and we're talking 20 years ago, folks. So
Right.
don't try to dig too far back into it. Most of it is pre-social media.
Right.
It all went really well, and these shows were shows that everyone made money. There was a lot of promotion. We ended up on the air. We ended up in magazines, all these things, up until the point where there were starting to be some personal issues in between groups.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the music that the bands put out and the names were bigger at that point from just being out there longer, once that disruption sort of started rumbling through things, it never went the same for any of those groups, and it poisoned the entire pool. I'd like to think that all of us that were in that learned a lesson and came out of it stronger people in the end. I think that generally is true.
Sure.
But there is a lesson to be learned there into what you said by trying to keep things easy, hassle-free, and focusing on the bigger picture. When you start taking your eye off of that is when everybody around you will falter.
I 100% agree. And that's a lesson that you can take into any business, and it, like we said at the beginning, everything builds on everything else. We never thought of this as business back in those days. We were all just kids, having fun. You guys were making music. I was promoting local bands and music and, and doing hosting shows and being the MC or whatever. Yep. That was kind of it just was fun. But if you look at, for me, where I've taken it, and I think you have as well with your life, if you look at that whole thing, we were actually learning how to sell. We were learning how to promote ourselves. We were learning how to be professional. We were learning how to take loss or failure, because sometimes things didn't go as perfect as you wanted it to go. And that happens every day in every business, that there is. But if you don't know how to come back from that, then you fail. And even in those days, if you played a gig and 3 people showed up, you guys would take that back and you'd be like, what did we do wrong? Did we not promote enough? Did we not sell enough tickets? Did we not tell people that we go on at 7 and not 10, or, whatever the reason was. But what you did was you learned, even from what you never probably thought of as a business, you learned core business strategy. You learned how to promote, put together a product, assess it, and make changes to it as time went on. And it's like that in everything. Anything that I do today is the same way. I do a promotion at the pinball place for, I don't know, right now we're running like a 2 for Tuesday thing. Get one person brings in a friend, their friend comes in for free, that type of a deal. Mm-hmm. Well, I did the work. I did the social media. I did the advertising. I put it out. I watched it last week for the first week of it. I'll watch it again next week for the next week of it. I'll assess it. I'll see if it's working. I'll try and figure out where it's working or where it's not working, and I'll adjust. That is how business works. I think people get so lost in the semantics of what a business is. And all a business is, at least in my head, is just using common sense to try your best to sell what you need to sell. And, I think too many people have watched Wall Street or whatever and think that that's what business is big buildings and, big money and what. Most businesses are not wealthy. Most business owners are not wealthy, but they're hardworking people. And the difference between success and failure is how they approach success and failure. You can be like me. I do not make $1 million a year. I don't. I never, probably am never going to. But I don't look at money as success. What I look at is I saw a 30% increase in my sales last year, or I saw, this promotion did better. Like we did a New Year promotion and it was significantly larger this year, like probably double what we did the previous year, which means that more people are finding out about us and we're growing and we're evolving as a business. And, that's how I assess it. The money will be there. You know what? I'm not worried that I'm going to be homeless tomorrow anymore. Those days are done for me. And I think that people have to have a little more balanced look. And I think that's where you lose a lot of people in businesses. They don't have a balanced approach to what they're doing.
I would agree. And again, taking this back to the independent creators out there, excuse me. A lot of the independent creators are looking to put themselves out as artists or creators. And honestly, all this stuff really is a business anyways. And all a business really is a set of behaviors between two people in a relationship trying to come to some sort of agreement.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. And especially for independent creators, the biggest thing that that any independent creator needs to keep in mind is don't compromise. Don't compromise what you're doing. Because if you're compromising, then you're not an independent creator. Then you're a business. There's a business aspect to being an independent creator, but what your end goal is makes a difference between if you're being creative or if you're being capitalist. And there is a difference. You are a musician, or at least at heart you're a musician. You can make music. Damn well you could go and make music that would make money, but it wouldn't be what you want to do. It wouldn't be the creative outlet that you want to do. You'd be trying to find yourself the next Nicki Minaj to play bass behind. Honestly, that's what you would be doing. It wouldn't.
I've forgotten everything.
Well, you'd figure it out, dude. It's an instrument. You'd pick it up and you'd be fine. But what I'm saying is, it would not be creatively fulfilling. If you did that, you would not be a creator anymore. You would not be an independent creative person. You would be a capitalist that's out there trying to sell it for capitalism. And
there's nothing wrong with that if that is the direction that you're looking to go.
Yeah, and that's fine. Look, I've written 5 books. I have said in every interview that I have done talking about my 5 books that, everybody asks me, well, what do you hope to sell? 1. My answer every time is 1 book, the one I'm going to buy, because I want it on my own shelf. It's not about money. I'm very fortunate that I have this large fan base from the classic metal show, and they do buy the books, and I can't thank them enough for buying my books. But in the end, it's not about money. If the books, it's nice that I get a check from Amazon every month. That's great. But whether I do or I don't, it doesn't change the fact that I'm going to keep writing books because I am creative. The books are one of my creative outlets away from the business that is the IT business or the pinball business or whatever. That's my creative muse. And if I write one, look, I'm writing the next 2 music ones I'm writing are on Dawkins' album Shadow Life and Megadeth's album Risk. 2 total dogs.
Oof.
2 total dogs. I don't expect them to sell really well. If the albums didn't sell well, I sure don't think that those records are going to sell well, but it's a passion project for me. And whether it sells 50 copies or 2,000 copies or whatever. It doesn't matter. For me, it's my passion outlet. And I think people get lost in all that. With the Classic Metal Show, because we say radical things, we actively do not pursue advertising. Mm-hmm. We do it for free, and we do it just because we like doing it. It's just fun, and I've argued for years that the minute we incorporate money into it, then we lose our creative freedom. What we end up with is an advertiser saying, well, we don't like that you said that word, or we don't like the direction that this is going, or we can't be, and what they do is they try to threaten you with it. We can't be associated and give you money if you're going to do this. And they try to strong arm you. Well, then you have to make your decision. Are you being a capitalist, or are you being creative? And for me, I have enough business. I have books that I sell, and I have 2 full-time businesses that I own. I don't need more business. So for me, it's like, this is my steam blow off moment. And I know I'm unique in that I have this creative outlet that also has a 50,000 a week audience, but I do, and I'm appreciative of it, but I wouldn't care if it was just me and Neely talking back and forth every week either. It still would be the same fun that it is.
Let's kind of go out with that a little bit, because I know I've kept you on for a little over an hour right now. Here's what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is you've got a lot of projects, you got a lot of irons in the fire.
Sure.
Let's take a minute, promote it, get out there, be the promo whore.
All right. Well, I'm everywhere. My IT business is Akin IT Services. The website's akinitservices.com. It's on all the socials as Akin IT Services. I have Pinball PA, pinballpa.com, and Pinball PA on all the socials. My books are, I have 5 of them. I have Little Victories. I have Call Me Chris, which is about my burn accident when I was burned up in a steel mill. Fun topic. And then I have this Cause and Effect series of books, which are about records that have changed something significant, whether it's a fan base or rock radio or something. And the 3 that I've written so far are on Metallica's Black Album, Motley Crue's self-titled from '94 with John Corabi as the singer instead of Vince Neil, and now Judas Priest Turbo is the 3rd one. You can get those at Barnes & Noble. You can get those at Amazon or anywhere that sells books. The Motley Crue and the Turbo also have audiobooks that are available on audible.com and iTunes. And I'm a busy boy. But
apparently you are. And then if you want to listen to the Classic Metal Show, this is probably the easiest one for people to go out and do today even.
Yeah. Yeah, that's easy. It's theclassicmetalshow.com is the website. There's all the links to listen live to it. We are everywhere and anywhere that there is social media, whether it's traditional, your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. With that one, because we say radical things, we've also been, we're looking forward a little bit to when Facebook and whatever kicks us off, because they're kicking everybody off these days because of language and blah, blah, blah. So we also have Reddit and Gab and BitChute for the videos. And, we have a full platform of the alternative media as well. So,
and we're going to have all the links in the show notes section on LimeLightDIY.com.
Cool.
You go into the episode list. You can download the individual episodes. You can get the show notes, a list to all the links that we've talked about today. I am going to throw out there again. I've known Chris for 20 odd years. There's some very inspirational stuff there. The books are, I've read a couple of the books so far, the more personal books. They are definitely not light reading, and it's something that definitely plan to give them a read, but invest a little bit of time in. And I will say this for the Classic Metal Show: some of the artists you will definitely know and love to hate, but do not listen with your kids in the car. Generally,
no, definitely not.
But if you are a consenting adult, it is one of the funniest shows that you can find out there. So, Chris, I appreciate you coming by today and kind of sharing your story. I had a whole bunch of questions for you, and you actually organically went through all of them anyways. So,
nice, perfect.
You made my job very easy today.
Well, I'm a salesman of me, I guess.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for LimeLight DIY today. Chris Akin is here. I'm going to have, again, everything in the show notes. If you're going to jump onto Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any of these other places and look for Chris right now, it's Chris. You know how to spell Chris. And Akin is Akin. You can find it all there. And Chris, thanks again. We will see you guys next time on LimeLight DIY.